S07E25.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Good evening, Alex. Yeah, doing pretty well. I mean, it's been a pretty mixed last couple of results, but all in all, I guess the feeling in the club is a little bit different, and there's a reason to be optimistic still, despite an interesting run of games, and certainly some big opportunities ahead.
Yeah, certainly. It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? We've had those two poor results against Preston and Derby, and heading into the games against Fulham and Sheffield United, we would have been, given cause to be a bit pessimistic about our chances. But as it sometimes happens, those harder games actually end up more of an opportunity to perform and do well. So we'll get into both of those games. But first of all, I just wanted to say for anyone watching along, if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, we are trying to get up to, I think we're at 127 subscribers at the moment, aiming for 150, if not 200 by the end of the season would be fantastic. So hit that subscribe button, hit like on the video and follow along. We'll jump into, first of all, that Fulham game. I guess the positive for me was, and we sort of talked last week, Dan and myself, about the concern about Shotta adapting or adjusting to life at the club and getting to know the players. The positive for me was probably the lineup and the fact that we brought in Slater, we brought in Smallwood. Yes, we shifted to a back four, but we looked a lot more solid defensively, and it really showed in the performance. How did you see that lineup, first of all?
Yeah, I agree. I was really happy with the lineup and got a little bit excited when I saw the team sheet get announced. I think it's a really interesting one with Shotta because, as fans, we always want more. And I think that it's very quick to hear the input from the social media warriors about, oh, we shouldn't have got rid of McCann after recent results. And I find that really intriguing because, only a few weeks ago, where before the appointment of Shotta, there was a lot of discussion whether McCann was the right man moving forward, or would we be happy to see him go? And, I think overall we were pretty divided on that. So, you see these interesting times when a manager takes over, where you do see teams, predominantly they will start to change their fortune and go on runs, and it changes the shape of the club. But equally, you've got to be prepared for exactly what we've seen in the last couple of games, with a manager who isn't familiar with English football and will take time to adjust. And as you said, I think this was probably the first sign of a manager who had learnt from the previous games and wanted to really try and apply his trade, and seemingly is starting to familiarise himself with the demands of English football.
Yeah, I mean, I think my comment last week, or my comparison, was I think a really clear comparison, in my mind at least, is to Leonard Slutsky, where that was probably the last time where we had a managerial change where Marco Silva, for the main part, had done quite well, in the same way that McCann sort of had a few good results finishing off his reign. So where it wasn't a case of the results dictating the change in manager, but more just circumstance. And Slutsky coming in as well, not having a huge amount of experience in English football, or none really. And that display at Derby was probably a little bit concerning, just in terms of the way we set up defensively. So to see the adjustments for this Fulham game, I think, again, like you said, were really pleasing to see. And it is quite a reassuring style change. And we see it again in the Sheffield United game. I think having Slater and Smallwood back in that midfield really gave us a lot more security. I think, as unfortunate as it is, I think Doherty is a great player for us, but I think his performances the last few games probably haven't been up to what we would expect. And so he's found himself out of the side for the last two games, in probably the first time in his time at City, really, apart from any injuries he's potentially had. I don't think he's necessarily ever been dropped. So that was a pretty interesting decision, I guess. The other one being Marcus Forss, and I guess less so with this one because that was more dictated by injury, with Eves struggling with something, and Elia also out with a groin injury as well. What have you? I mean, there's been a bit of debate about Forss as well, and I mean, I guess probably similar to Shotta. I mean, he's quite new to the side. It's probably hard to make a judgment too quickly on him. But what have you made on his start at City?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's a mixed one. It's not one where you've seen Forss hit the ground running and everyone is kind of on board that he's certainly we've got a player on our hands. I don't think that you'd have to search pretty far and wide to find someone who has taken that opinion. But at the same time, I think there's been glimpses from Forss that have shown that he's a quality signing, and he certainly does have a role to play in this particular City squad. So, as I said, I don't think he's done anything overwhelming, but I think he's shown enough promise to to give him the benefit of the doubt and see how he goes in particularly the next few fixtures.
Yeah, I found it a little bit ironic. I think Ivan Toney is now out injured at Brentford, and you'd think if Force was still in that side, he'd probably be starting in the Premier League at the moment, which you sort of think if we're sitting here saying he's not good enough for our side, but he'd otherwise be starting in a Premier League side, it's a bit of a backward situation there. On the game itself, I mean, we did have a few chances, and talking about Force, I mean, he had arguably one of the best chances, Honeyman the other. We really did give them a game, though. I mean, they scored, I think it was the second half when Mitrovic got his header. So they sort of broke us down in the end. But probably conditions played their part as well. The ground stuck a little bit under the ball, probably played to our advantage as well. But miles better than the Derby game.
Oh, absolutely. I think there has been a few fixtures this season where you've just kind of wished them away and wanted the game to end. I remember, namely Stoke, particularly the second time, was just one of those games where for 70 minutes it was a really hard watch. And I think Derby was certainly reminiscent of that type of game where you kind of knew what the result was going to be early on, and you really had to persevere to finish the match. Whereas I guess on the back of that Derby performance, having the what I think is probably safe to say the next inductees to the Premier League, Fulham, I'd be really surprised to see them not capitalised from the position they're in now to play the way that we did against them, and as you said, give them a real game, and certainly could have picked a point up towards the end in the dying moments as well, but. It was a far better improved performance, and you really did get that feeling that from the outset that it was a game that we were looking forward to, and I think the confidence where we genuinely thought we could get something from it, and that's an encouraging sign after such as we mentioned, a very poor performance at Derby.
Yeah, certainly. So an improved performance. I mean, Mitrovic with the goal. I don't think there are too many things surer than that in the Championship at the moment. As you said, they're pretty much Premier League elect at the moment. And Mitrovic, I think, with that goal, equaled the record for the most goals in a Championship season, and he's still got about 15 games to go. I guess with that, the only criticism I'd say is, you're watching back on the replays. Fleming's sticking to his man quite rightly, but he's calling in for some support. It's probably KLP, I dare to say, is probably at fault there a little bit from not pressing a bit more on I think it's Nico Williams or whatever his name is, the Liverpool loanee who gets the cross in. Probably the only criticism I can level with that goal.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It probably was a case of KLP just not following. And, I think it's really easy to forget that KLP is pretty much the focal point in our attack at the moment. And we are asking a lot of him, and he's still an incredibly young player. So I think it probably gets, masked a little bit when you hear all these links to, the promise he's shown and the clubs that he might be going to, and the kind of transfer fee that he may demand. He's still a young player, and particularly playing in the Championship of all places, it's a very difficult league to be able to perform on both ends of the ball. And I think, as you're right, it probably was KLP's fault. I think we'll let it slide if it's a 1-0 result against
That's right.
one of the most informed Championship teams that we've probably ever seen. We'll let it slide. But I think he's probably the man at fault if you were to lay any blame.
Yeah, if you're going to be particularly harsh, that's right. Yeah, I don't think you can fault him too much in that sense. The other player to shout out is probably Ingram. I think he was criticised by myself, amongst others, after the displays last week, especially against Derby. I thought he was terrific in this one. I mean, there was that moment early on, I think, where he came out and Wilson got in around him and luckily didn't score from it. But otherwise, I thought he was terrific. He made a number of good saves and really looked like, I mean, like any player, he's probably just a bit rusty. He hasn't played in a while, so he's sort of settling back into the side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the other thing is, like, as a keeper, it's such a difficult task when we know how well Ingram started the season, then he's obviously been replaced, and then to be called upon again. You have to have that level of resilience to be able to, to keep showing up and performing. And as you rightly said, it was an impressive performance from him, and full credit to him.
Okay, well, I'll move on then to my MVP votes and then I'll grab yours. I've probably given the 3 to Smallwood, another player I haven't really mentioned or called out, but I think him coming back into that side really improved that center of the park for us, gave that extra cover for the defense. And was I don't think it's a coincidence that we became a lot more assured in our defense with Smallwood back in the side, playing that sort of disruptor role in midfield, I would say. Two votes I gave to Slater, probably similarly. I think it's interesting. I don't know if we saw Slater and Smallwood in the side much together last season, but I thought they worked really well together. Slater, we'll talk about as well with the Sheffield United game, but it's great to see him getting a few starts in the side and really looking like he belongs at this level and belongs at the club. So already proving to be a really astute signing from Sheffield United, that one. And then the one vote for Ingram, as we sort of just touched on, I think a really improved display from him and a really assured performance between the sticks.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I probably would have swapped it. I would have given Slater my 3 points and Smallwood 2, but I think Ingram's a great shout for 1.
Fair enough. All right, well, we'll talk now about the Sheffield United game, which was yesterday morning. It already feels like it was a little while ago. 0-0. Not too bad. I mean, if you'd said before this week would take a point from these 2 games, you'd be pretty happy with that. A real battling sort of performance away at Sheffield United. I mean, their fans got pretty riled up at supposed time-wasting techniques or tactics. And I'd say, well, if you're going to sort of throw elbows in faces and draw blood from our players, you've got to expect there'll be a few stoppages. So, look, an unchanged side from the Fulham game. I was a bit worried early on that we might be run a bit ragged and tire out as the game went on, but they looked really impressive and performed really well.
Yeah, it was a very strong defensive effort, and I think that it needed to be because, as you mentioned, it was a very, very tense Bramall Lane, and just the way that the game started, you could kind of feel the tenacity in the crowd, and there was a real certainly watching the footage on television back here, there was just an electricity around the ground where you could tell that it was one of those really difficult away fixtures where they were certainly up for it. And I think as the game kind of grew on, we started to frustrate them and certainly their fans. And I think the call on the commentary that I really enjoyed was pretty close to the 90th minute when they talked about the carnival atmosphere that was in the away end for a 0-0, which was pretty impressive. To probably sums up the performance in the whole, that we were very happy with the point, and it was a very incredibly well-deserved one, especially after the loss to Derby into a loss to Fulham. We did need something to kind of steady the ship, and it didn't come in the form of 3 points, but it was a very valuable one.
Yeah, look, I mean, and also full credit, a big shout out to all the travelling away supporters. Almost 2,000 there is an awesome display. For midweek fixture at Sheffield United. Look, it was one of those games where I think the longer it went on, you just felt that it was more and more likely to be 0-0 because they were just getting more frustrated. And I think Shotta said after the game, they only probably had 1 shot on target in that second half. And it probably felt a lot more tense than that. It felt like it dragged out. But on reflection, you think we were actually reasonably assured in that second half. And one substitution that I really liked, which at the time I was a bit unsure on, was Alfie Jones coming on into midfield to replace Slater. And it actually worked really well because it gave us that dynamic sort of flexibility in our shape where he was one of the midfield 3, but then at times was able to drop and slot quite comfortably back into that defensive formation and turn it into a back 3 almost. And I thought that worked really well to help us see out the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of very crucial challenges as well. I know that he left his feet a few times, and it was the timing had to be spot on, and it was. So, yeah, I agree. I thought Alfie Jones was exceptional.
Speaking of timing having to be spot on, how about that Honeyman yellow card? I was saying to Dan in the chat just after it happened, I said, look, it's absolutely 100% a yellow card, but I was also thinking it's not one of those challenges which I thought was particularly dirty. Like it was the sort of thing I do in football where, you're going for the ball, you're committing to the ball, and you're basically just saying to yourself, even if my timing's slightly out, I'm just going to commit to it. And he did it, and he rightly copped the yellow card. But Honeyman's got that in him a couple of times this season, which is quite funny to see.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those ones that, if anything, they're good to watch.
Yeah, that's right. And look, can't go past Fleming either for a massive shout out. He's had a few really top displays this season already, and we didn't really touch on him in that Fulham game as well, but a few instances in that game as well where I think I was saying to Dan last week, he's our most. I saw the comparison on Twitter. I should say it wasn't my comparison, but he's the most like Andy Robertson that we've had as a left back since Robertson left the club, with his ability to take on the opposition and get up the field. And in this game against Sheffield, especially with KLP linking up on that left hand side, they were really in sync with each other, and it was quite effective.
Absolutely. And one thing that I do want to say about Fleming as well is, I remember him in, I say the early days. It's not so long ago, but just his development as a footballer in recent times over the last couple of years. I know there was a few times where he was brought on late in games to plug holes in the championship, and was actually responsible for a few legged goals. And I didn't really consider him to be that much of a player. There's almost like this resurgence of how he's now been allowed to develop and kind of found his feet. And as you mentioned, the last few games, he's just been outstanding and showing that, as you said, the comparisons to Andy Robertson, you don't get those, every day. So if he's drawing those kind of plaudits, well, that probably reflects the type of performances that he's putting in.
Yeah, because that last championship season, I remember I sort of had him in the same category as Rob McKenzie, who they were sort of both those young fullbacks / McKenzie sort of played centre back sometimes, and you thought, they can do a job, they can slot into the side, but they're not the sort of player you think will go to that next level like a KLP or someone like that. But this season, he's completely proved me wrong, and he's really looking. He's in that same bracket now as Greaves and KLP, where he really deserves that starting spot. Even with Elder fully fit, Elder was on the bench.
Absolutely. And that is another thing in itself. I mean, I know that we'll have to talk about the Coyle injury later in the piece as well. But the fact that you are talking now about, Coyle, Fleming, Callum Elder, it's certainly an area of strength for City with what we have in the fullbacks department.
Yeah, that's right. And I was just about to come on to that with Coyle getting subbed off with that injury. I think it's looking like a hamstring injury, so presumably 3 to 4 weeks. I found it interesting, actually, that we brought Elder on and played him on the right. I thought we might have switched to a 3-5-2 and dropped Longman back into that wing-back position. But, I mean, look, Elder playing on the right. I think I saw the comment. It was probably one of the first times that, a side would have had a back five, including the keeper, all left-footed. It was quite a sight. And look, Elder performed quite well on the right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that that it was the type of game that you do. I like seeing Callum Elder when he's fiery, because you can tell that he's really up for the task. And there was a few moments towards the end of the game, particularly where you could see it in his face. It was that aggression. He really, I think he relished the role, and that probably speaks to a man who's under pressure. To try and find his way back into the side. So, full credit to him as well.
Look, he's probably turned to Shotter and say, look, if you need to play me on the right, play me on the right. I just want to get on. No, certainly. Yeah. Well, how about then I'll grab your 3 votes for your MVP first, and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, so I think Fleming was the one that was the complete standout. So you probably pencil him in for 3. I had Alfie Jones as 2. I thought that, the fact that it was a 0-0 game and there was some incredibly critical defensive, reads and plays by him towards the end. I think he's definitely 2. And then, KLP, he was causing havoc when he was released, but a really interesting game. And I guess it's sometimes hard to put KLP in your 3-2-1s when it's a 0-0 draw. But
yeah. But yeah, and no, that is right. And look, and so for my votes, I also went Fleming with the 3. I went KLP for the 2 and Jones for the 1. So similar players to you. But I agree. I mean, KLP to me, his ability to take on a man and really sort of press on and get us up the pitch and draw a foul, I think really alleviated a lot of the pressure on the side. And it was both him and Fleming, to be honest. They were both causing a lot of havoc down that right-hand side for Sheffield United, left-hand side for us. And that ability to draw a foul really sort of relieved that pressure from us and let us push up the field. So even though it was a 0-0, I think he still played a really vital role in the performance.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's an incredibly underrated role that he does play in the City, particularly when you do those difficult away fixtures.
And I guess just before we move on, I mean, we had one player we haven't really touched on was Ryan Longman, who he seems that sort of mercurial player where he was very sort of invisible for large portions of this game, but in saying that, had almost our best chance of snatching the 3 points against Sheffield with that curling effort late in the game. And he seems one of those players, and that's why I get a little not frustrated, but it disappointed us sometimes when he gets subbed off. When I feel like late in these games, he's the sort of player you want on the ball. You saw it against Everton in the Cup as well, for instance. He can just pop up and grab, and Bournemouth, where we did get the goal. Yeah, exactly. So that effort he had late in this game as well, a few inches to the left, and we could have been walking away with the 3 points.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that, Alex. And I think it's a really interesting one. I think late in this game there was I think it was Tom Eaves that got released of all people, actually, and then he obviously had that heavy touch when he tried to go back inside.
Oh yeah.
But you're spot on in saying that Longman has proven that, particularly in the depth of games when we are pretty condensed and looking to break quickly, he's the type of player that you do just sense has that X factor or the ability to produce something special. So yeah, it's an interesting an interesting trait to attach to a City player. But you're right, he's proven it a few times that he can be that man if called upon.
In that sort of mold with KLP, Bowen, Harry Wilson's probably the three that come to mind as being similar sort of players in that sense. Okay, well, let's move on then. We'll go through our triple flashback feature before we go into our previews for next week. And I'm sort of probably half giving away one of these answers here, but given the sides that we've just faced in Fulham and Sheffield United and one of the managers that we faced, the question for this week is, can you name the last 3 City managers who have managed City and have subsequently then managed a Premier League club? It might have been they might have managed City whilst we were in the Premier League, but then gone on to another club that's played in the Premier League whilst they managed them.
Yeah. Okay. I think the giveaway there is Marco Silva. Obviously, his appointment after leaving us to Everton was the clear one. Steve Bruce, obviously, he went to Newcastle. The third one. This is. I hope this isn't obvious. I hope that I'm not just sleeping on.
I wouldn't say it's 100% obvious. No, so it is one to think about.
We're going
because it was an arguably quite forgettable spell because he was only at the club for, I want to say, 3 or 4 months. Might be a hint in itself.
Yeah. So are we able to go back and say Nigel Pearson, because he obviously was a Premier League manager, but when he took over at Leicester, they were a Championship side.
You know what? You are right. It is Nigel Pearson, but I was actually thinking of his more recent spell at Watford. So he was at Watford for about 4 months in the Premier League. But you're right on both counts because he was also the Leicester Premier League manager as well. So no, that's actually funny. I hadn't thought of it from the point of view of Leicester. I was thinking from Watford, but yeah, there you go. So yeah, so Silva left us for Watford. Bruce, of course, got to Newcastle after spells at Villa and Sheff Wednesday. And then Pearson, first at Leicester, and then I think he went to Belgium or something, and then came back to Watford in the Premier League as well. Yeah. All right. Well, we do have I'd say two easier games this week than Fulham and Sheffield, but I guess easy is sort of relative in this league. After how we did against Preston and Derby, you can't really tell how the games are going to go. The first of the two is against QPR. They've been managed by Warburton for a couple of years now, I think, so he's quite stable at the helm there. And they did beat us 3-0 earlier in the season, the game where I think Moncur got a red card, and it was probably the only game I can remember where Matt Smith started a game for us in that brief loan spell for Man City, and looked pretty good in that game, actually. They've only had 1 win in their last 5, though, so quite a vulnerable or quite a good time to face them whilst they're a bit vulnerable, having lost to Barnsley and Millwall in their last 2 games. They're challenging for, I wouldn't say automatic promotion, probably more just the playoff places, but at the same time, it's probably a good time to face them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you say that in the sense that their recent form suggests that, but I mean, what better get right than a struggling City side as well. So, I mean, we have to be really, encouraged by that performance at Sheffield United, and that has to be the catalyst for, to stop this poor run that we've been on recently. I think you're right. It probably is a nice time to get them in the sense that they seem to be failing, but as you mentioned, they still are up in the top end of the Championship table, and as we're very accustomed to, and we've seen it time and time again in the Championship. It's very hard to go and perform and do what you say we're seeing Fulham do at the moment, to keep that consistency. Yeah. Every team has their slumps and and goes through these rocky periods. And once you get that win, it's really crucial that you go get another 3 points and try and ride the momentum as it comes. So as QPR are in a slight rut, it is a good time for us, but I think it's so much more about how we fared against Sheffield United and what we've actually were able to harness and take into the next game.
So yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, that's right. And I think they've got plenty of dangerous players in their midst. They've got Chris Willock and Elias Jarrah, probably the two main dangerous players. They've got Lyndon Dykes, who I always think of Lyndon Dykes when I think of what's his name, the striker who plays for Australia, name's gone out of my head, but he's Scottish and then nominated for Australia. And Lyndon Dykes was born in Oz, but then nominated for Scotland. And it was around the same time. And I think we were trying to get Dykes to nominate for Australia as well. So I always think of him as, well, he is essentially an Australian, so it's a bit of a funny one, but he's in reasonable form for them as well. So few dangerous players in their midst. I mean, one player that we won't face is Geordie Device, who, despite QPR fans being over the moon when they signed him on a permanent from us, has subsequently been loaned out from the club. So not going hugely well there for him. I guess the question sort of is what changes, if any, would you make? Well, I mean, obviously Coyle's going to be out of the side with his injury, but how would you see the side lining up for this one?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, that's probably the obvious one. I mean, do we see Callum Elder start at right back? Like it could happen.
Yeah,
it may well happen, and I think that would be another really interesting thing to see how Shota goes about selecting his side, because as I said, he's still relatively unknown to English football, and whilst it's okay to kind of plug a stopgap during a game, would you then go and start the starter side like that? So I'll be fascinated to see what happens there. I actually don't have an opinion on what I think will happen. I guess the other thing that you may want to consider is it was an unchanged side for the back-to-backs between Fulham and Sheffield United. So there may be some thinking with freshening up the legs. You might like a Tyler Smith come and start. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, that's right. Or if Smallwood can't play 3 games in a week, we go with Slater at the base of the midfield and we bring Doherty back in or something. Yeah, that'd be an interesting one as well. Force as well. I mean, like if Eves is now fully fit, I think the news is that Baxter will miss this game, and also Elia Sabanesh will be out as well. So probably we'll see Force up top again, Eves off the bench. There's some suggestion, I guess, in that Brentford loan deal that there is sort of an expectation of starts for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he does get rotated at all or just sort of plays through the season. I guess I think, as you said, I mean, Tyler Smith maybe getting a start. It's an interesting one because, as you say, I think the formation of the 4-3-3 worked really well the last 2 games. So it'll be interesting to see if he's happier to stick with the formation or adjust for the personnel available. It'd be fascinating to see Elder from the start at right back, considering on the first day of the season we had 2 right backs in the squad playing Emmanuel and Coyle on both sides. So to now have 2 left backs would be quite interesting. But I guess for this guy, how do you feel going into this one? Do you think we can come away with the 3 points?
I was really encouraged by that Sheffield United performance, and I do get the feeling that that this mishap or this poor run of form that we've been on as of late, I think that that has to change at some point, and I think that performance yesterday was the catalyst for it. I'm really confident in this one. I actually think we'll probably go and win 2-0.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. There's a fair bit of lightning going on in the background here, so it's probably creeping through on the audio. Yeah, look, I'm pretty confident in this game as well. I think it's a good time to play them. They'll be tightening up a lot because I feel like, from our own experience, when you're chasing promotion, if you drop a few games, it can get very nervy to sort of, do you kind of go on the attack and try and become much more open to try and score goals and win games, or do you tighten up and go defensive just to get a few points going and get back, stop the rot from a couple of losses? So it's a good time to face them. I think Millwall, who've been pretty poor, were able to beat them 2-0, I think, during the week. So it gives us a good opportunity to try to get the 3 points against them. We've also got the Barnsley game midweek, which I'm really looking forward to because this is that £2 game where we're going to see hopefully a huge crowd at the KCOM, or the MKM, I should say, for the game against Barnsley. They've they've just won their first game in quite some time, and it was against QPR. So their 1 win in 5 games has come against our other opponent this week. We did beat them back in November. Honeyman and KLP with the goals in that one. I think that was the first of 4 wins in a row for us. That sort of little patch of wins for us as well. And look, if there's any game, I think it was, I can't remember if it was yourself or it might have been Dan I was talking to, where I was saying if we can beat the 3 teams in the relegation zone, we'll essentially be safe. And we've dropped the game against Derby, but I think if we can win both this game against Barnsley and the game coming up in the next couple of weeks against Peterborough, we really should put ourselves in quite a strong position. So it's a must win in the sense that I think it's a really strong position we'd be putting ourselves in, but we really should be winning it anyway.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you mentioned it, but we need to probably pause on that. A £2 game for a Yorkshire derby at the MKM, like what a fantastic initiative. I think that to see, when we talk about the club changing hands and having an owner that's come in and really tried to resonate and make himself known to the fans, I think what an incredible way to do it. And the fact that, as you mentioned, like how critical the game against Barnsley is for us, staving off relegation. If we were to get 3 points even against them, it would be, no doubt is it a 6-pointer. But if the stadium's bouncing and we're able to get a win over a very struggling Barnsley side, it would be an incredibly big step forward into, as you said, securing our survival.
And this is the sort of game I really do hope that, Elia is fit, Force is fit. We can get the new signings starting the game and really hopefully getting a bit of confidence and filling their boots with a couple of goals, because there's really no reason that we shouldn't be able to go out. Like Derby is one thing. Derby, without their points deduction, are essentially a mid-table side, but Barnsley are legitimately a very poor side this season. So unlike the Derby game where we did throw a few of those signings in and it didn't really work out for us, this is a game where we should be able to throw those signings in, get their confidence up, get some goals, and really sort of set ourselves up for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what better way to do it on that type of stage? Like if we are pretty much assured a packed house, what a way to announce yourself to the fans. Like I imagine if you're one of those new signings, and you get given the nod to start, the buzz that would be going through you, and the energy that you want to be able to show to the fans, get yourself on the score sheet or get yourself a second goal, and all of a sudden you're an instant hero. And so that's certainly going to be going through the minds of those players. And as you said, if all goes to plan and they are injury free, what a mouthwatering clash that's going to be.
Absolutely. So I guess I'm probably seeing a 3 or a 4-0 win in this one. I'm really confident that we've got the attacking talent now, and Barnsley are a poor team, that we should be able to really just run through them.
Look, we've been talking it up now. We've got to hope that it's a special day, because if it's a lackluster 1-0 defeat, it's going to be really hard to come back on. But I agree with you, Alex. I'm very confident, and I think that this has, well, without sounding arrogant, the ability to be a blowout. I think it'll be a comfortable victory. I'd be really surprised if we didn't get 3 points in that particular fixture.
Yeah, that's right. I think if we were to concede early in that one, it'd be a very nervy night. But look, it's a midweek fixture, so it's going to be a great game for us to be up at 7 a.m. or whatever time it's kicking off and enjoying that one all the way through. Well, I've enjoyed all the way through this episode, so thank you for joining me for this one, Logan.
My pleasure, Alex. Great to be here.
No worries. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. We've got 2 big fixtures this week. Hopefully, we'll be back next week to talk about all 6 points that we've picked up in those 2 games. But until next time, come on, City.